Hi guys, James O'Brien is famous for his contempt for the conmen, compassion for the conned. And as he watched the farmers protesting against post-Brexit trade deals and a raw deal from a Brexiteer government, he began to question the sense of such a catchphrase. Liz Webster and many within British farming had sounded the alarm before the referendum, knowing that leaving the EU would negatively impact their sector, but also result in food becoming more expensive for the most vulnerable in society. The media, of course, allowed charlatans like Mogg, Johnson, Farage and others to sell their sunlit uplands pretty much unchallenged. Now we see tractors descending on London. Have a listen to O'Brien's monologue about the conned here, and I'll attempt to explain why I believe so many farmers backed Brexit.
And what I find extraordinary, and why I sometimes struggle to muster up the sympathy for every single victim of the con men, as opposed to the actual con men themselves, is that we were told this. Jacob Rees-Mogg, what do you think he meant when he talked about cheap food for peasants? What do you think he was referring to when he said he'd be perfectly happy shipping in tons of hormone-injected beef from Australia? What did you think that would do to British beef farmers? When Patrick Minford talked about the necessity of running down manufacturing and agriculture in the way that we had run down coal and steel. I genuinely, and I don't know, and I'll never know, and I can't really imagine ever addressing the issue in an academic sense because I find it so impenetrable. What did people hear when the rest of us were hearing the truth? Farmers seemed to believe it more completely than anybody. Farmers had more to lose and more at stake than anybody else except the fishermen. Well, and the exporters. And the universities. I could go on. But farmers had more to lose than almost any other section of society, and yet they were queuing up to stick bloody great signs in their fields saying, vote Brexit. Everywhere you went in 2016, if you had the pleasure of driving through British countryside, it would be in some way sullied by seeing a whopping great trailer parked at the side of the road with vote Brexit on the side of it, or a picture of Nigel Farage with a pint pot on his head. The farmers seemed, and the statistics sadly support this to a point, the best efforts of people like Liz Webster notwithstanding, the farmers seemed to sign up for Brexit with more alacrity and enthusiasm than any other public-facing profession in the country.
And he's correct. Now, once again, it's important not to tar all farmers with the same brush. Many of them voted to remain in the European Union, but a significant number voted to leave. Now, I want to focus on those who voted to leave. Why did they do that? And I've been racking my brain trying to come up with a reason for this. And I think I've come up with two possible conclusions. And there may be more, but the two I've come up with, one being they didn't believe it was going to impact them. So they believe that, yes, we're part of the supply chain, but if there is a Brexit, if we leave the European Union, the single market, it's going to be somebody else's problem. We'll produce the beef, we'll produce the dairy products, but it will be somebody else's to fix. And this, of course, shows a complete lack of understanding of a supply chain, because if one part of it breaks down, all of it breaks down. And we saw that with Brexit. We saw that, for example, the fishing industry, they catch the fish and then they're not able to sell it to the distributors because the distributors can't export it to the single market. So they told fishermen, stop catching these fish because you're not going to be able to sell them to us. We're not going to buy them. So I think part of this comes down to a lack of understanding of the consequences of Brexit. And of course, if you're listening to people like Nigel Farage, Boris Johnson, Jacob Rees-Mogg and others who will say, don't worry about this, then that's a problem as well, because these people are not experts. The experts were saying, no, this is going to create problems. So I think one part of it is a lack of understanding of the impact Brexit would have. And this idea that, well, it's, we're part of a supply chain, but it will be somebody else's fault or somebody else's problem. Now, the other, unfortunately, I've come to is greed. This idea that, well, look, I want to, and this is a certain section of the farming community. We have to be honest about this, but I think some of it is down to greed. This idea that, well, I want to be able to dump as much fertilizer, or chemicals in general into the land. I want to get the biggest yield possible. I want to maximize profit, and to hell with the consequences. The same with animal welfare standards. I want to be able to treat the animals as I wish. I don't want somebody else telling me what to do. I don't want the European Union imposing restrictions in these areas like the environment or animal welfare or workers' rights. I don't want that. So I want to be able to be free to do whatever the hell I want. And It was music to their ears when people like Nigel Farage turned up on their farms or turned up at their markets, telling them, when we leave the European Union, you can do whatever the hell you want. You'll be able to dump as much fertilizer in the land as you want because there'll be no more EU regulations. You'll be able to treat the animals as you want because you won't have the dumb EU telling you what to do. People in Brussels who don't know anything about farming telling you what to do. This was music to their ears. Now they're reaping the benefits. And once again, it's important to remember that people like Liz Webster and others, the National Farmers Union, were telling people about the consequences of leaving the European Union. But I think a lack of understanding and drove so many to vote for Brexit. Perhaps some of these farmers who had these big signs up in their fields probably have them somewhere in a warehouse or in a barn or something like that at the moment. Maybe they should take them out, dust them off, and have a long think about this. And stop listening to charlatans and crooks and start listening to experts, people who actually understand reality and not politicians who will just use whatever bandwagon they can to further their careers and make themselves richer. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.